and welcome to this week's look at action and stunts on film and television here in the wonderful world of YouTube. How are you? Welcome to Friday. Thanks for making it through another week. We are part 2 of our Q&A. If you remember, on Wednesday we had some great questions posed by those who chose to email me with questions. This week we are looking at social media questions, and we're going to have a little look at those and see how we get on. And we will start. There's some points from previous from the podcast questions, just a little point that I did say I was going to clarify, and we will start with that, and it goes like this. So, as I mentioned, this was the picture that I was on the location for. Lady and the Highwayman, Emma Sams, Oliver Reed, cast of hundreds, Claire Bloom, who else is next? Christopher Cazenove, Lisette Anthony. We spent quite a bit of time with Lisette. And Hugh Grant, God love him. What a mop of hair. Michael York, who was King Charles II. John Mills, a fine head of hair. And Ian Bannon. And Robert Morley popped up as well. Bernard Miles. And Gordon Jackson. Now, the scene, Gareth Hunt. Not a coffee in sight. This is the sequence that Elaine Ford is doubling for Lisette on this horse here. And on the other horse is Gordon Jackson, and he is being doubled by Nick Wilkinson. I am behind the camera as the two gallop past and go up to the hall itself. We spent the entire day there, but it was just a remarkable moment. This is them as they go away. There's a shot then of the wanted poster, and then it comes back. There's the two of them galloping across, and here is Yon Hugh as the flashing blade. And then this moment, as they come right there past the camera, I'm right behind the camera as they come thundering past. Absolutely magnificent, and running up to the hall itself. It's also a nice bit of sword work, which we're going to have a little look at here as well. It was Terry Walsh who was doubling Ian Bannon during this sword fight, and Graham Crowther who was doing the doubling for Hugh Grant during this particular sequence. Lots of stuff going on. The scene was much, much longer, as I remember. They did cut it down in the edit, but the rehearsals, the two guys were working out the rehearsals, working out the routine. They worked it out in the morning and then filmed it in the afternoon, and quite pacey. A couple of little additional shots thrown in, rolling about, falling about, missing this, missing that. I don't remember that fire being there, mind you, but Terry rather expected to have his arse in it at some point, but I think they missed it. Oh, right, okay, Graham goes past it, that's what it was. And it's a nice little scene. As I say, it runs lots of handheld camera stuff here as well, tracking back and forth. And then the final shot, as he comes round here, and I believe that our Hugh gets him right there in the breadbasket. Have that, son. There we go. Job's a good one. So, answers to questions. First question is at Jim Early, I beg your pardon, Jim Early 5492, and it says, I'd love to see an episode about the undisputed king of Hollywood stuntmen, the legendary Hal Needham. Not a question, more a request. And yeah, fair enough. I see that. We've got some bits and pieces on the channel already regarding Hal, but there is some other little bits and pieces. There's a video on the channel It's called The Greatest Stuntman, but it's about the making of Hooper. So if you haven't seen that, Jim, go to the channel and go and check that out, because it's a nice little interview with Hal, and it's also a little behind-the-scenes making-of thing regarding the picture Hooper. Who else we got? We've got Vinnie Harris. Vinnie Harris 94. This is on Twitter. I think it is still Twitter to me and will always be Twitter. Vinnie, of course, has been on the show already. If you remember, we did a top 10, a Bond top 10. We're going to do some more of those in the not-so-distant future. And he says, my question is, who is the most interesting, famous person you've met over the years? Now, it's an interesting one because I've been very lucky. I've been in a situation where I've managed to meet a bunch of exciting people. Exciting and interesting, I will say, are two very different things. Not naming any names, I think that's only fair at this stage. There are people you go, oh my God, it's so-and-so. And you try and grab a few words from them and you realise you ain't going anywhere with this. You know, what you're trying to do, what I try and do particularly, with a great many individuals that I speak to, whether they are from, whether they're actors or particularly actors, if I do get an opportunity to speak to them, I often like to speak to them about their doubles, their stunt people. And there is still a little bit of something that says, no, talk about me. You've asked me a question. There are many that will discuss them and will talk about them, and that's great. But I do have, because I've had a previous life, you know, I've not solely been doing this, although it's taken up a great deal of my time. I've had a couple of interesting occurrences, the first of which I tell you about. I used to work in an airport. I was airport security in Belfast International Airport for many years. 6 years I worked there. It was a sensational job. We had some great times, and you got to meet a great many people. And there's a couple of occurrences there. I hadn't been there very long. And you go to an airport, you know yourself. You go to the security section, you've gone through boarding cards, you're into the security section now, and you are doing what every passenger should be doing. They are removing all of those metal things from their pockets, or they're taking their jacket off, or they're lifting out their laptop, or they're doing whatever they need to do. Well, back then when I was working, that's what you had to do. Belts off, laptops out, jackets off, you know, loose change out of your pockets, that went in as well. And 1 in 7 people had to remove their shoes because of the shoe bomber. If you remember the guy that had explosives in his shoes and tried to blow up an airliner, well, ever since then, that's what the deal was. The Department for Transport said that every 7th person had to remove their shoes, so we physically had to count them off, and the 7th person, regardless of who they were, would have their shoes removed. Unless, of course, you were wearing heels, boots that covered the ankle, you know, that sort of thing, then you'd have to take them off anyway. But I hadn't been there very long, and it's Belfast, right? Now, the Belfast that I then knew, subsequently, over the years that I was there, wasn't like the Belfast that I knew when I was growing up, watching the television and during the Troubles. So I am loading, the loading person is the first person you come to. You arrive and there is a loader at the end, and they are the people that's saying, have you got everything out of your pocket, take this off, etc., etc., and they give you the tray and you're loading the tray, right? And I was on the furthest away was, I think, lane 6, and lane 6 was often where the large push chairs and that type of thing would have to go through. It was a much larger X-ray machine and to put stuff through. And over a period of time, you get into a bit of a routine. You have your head down and you're talking to the people and you're explaining what you need and you're taking everything, and somebody's walking past you and go, you'll need to remove that out. You've got a phone in your pocket, so lovely, thank you, pop it in there. So you're doing this and you're not really bringing your head up unless you're looking for things particular. And I said to this guy, I'm going to need your shoes, sir. He said, right. And pop your jacket in there for me. Oh, and the belt on your trousers? Right. And then he says to me, anything else? And I looked up, and it was Jerry Adams. It was Jerry Adams. Now, for those people who don't know, in the United Kingdom at that time, Jerry Adams, of course, was the leader of Sinn Féin, the political wing of the IRA, and we'd never heard him speak because the BBC had passed a law, well, the government had passed the law, but it was taken over by the BBC, that any of his words, he wasn't allowed to speak them. So if he was interviewed, his words had to be delivered by an actor. So I'd never heard him speak before, and there he was, bold as brass, right in front of me. It was the strangest thing. And the blood, well, no disrespect to him, but the blood drained from my face because that was the first time I'd met him. Subsequently, over the period of time, you got to meet a great many individuals who were politically connected, walking through the airport. But Jerry Adams was a bit of a surprise on day one, or the first week, certainly after my training. The other one that I will tell you about is a rather nice one, because I was working. It was a checkpoint called Checkpoint 1, and in the main entrance, it was the main entrance to the delivery section, so all of the loading would come in. And we also had the Executive Jet Centre, which is where a lot of politicians or celebrities would come through. RAF Aldergrove was just behind us, and there was many political people would come in through there. And lots of celebrities would occasionally come through our checkpoint to get to the Executive Jet Centre, which was airside, and therefore, you were able to explain the situation and search them, more importantly, so they didn't have to go through the main terminal. And consequently, what had happened was that in Belfast we had a number of arenas, musical arenas, and Elton John had played one night, and he came through, and I was in the checkpoint, and I knew that he wasn't allowed to go through the metal detector, the archway, because he had a pacemaker, and consequently he had to come around the archway, and I had to search him. And he's wearing a tracksuit. He's got off stage. He's changed, and he's now in a tracksuit. And the entire band and the entire road crew who were with him at the time, backing singers and various bits and pieces, all had to come through. And we had to search the lot. My colleague who was there at the time, and then she was searching all the women, and I was searching all the fellas. And I had to search Elton. And if you've ever been to an airport, you know that the type of search that you're getting, the physical search, and you have to explain to them, I'm going to search you, is that okay? That's the first question that you have to ask. If they say no, well, my issue was that you're going to get searched anyway, but it's only going to delay the situation. But very rarely did you get a no. But there were occasions. But Elton had said, yes, that's absolutely fine. And so you start with the neck area, and you work around the neck, the collar, and then you do under the arms to do the back. You go down the back to the waistband. You then you literally put your thumbs inside the waistband, and you go around the waistband until you come to the front. You then place your left hand on the inside of the thigh, and the right hand goes up to the buttock, and you make circling motions down the leg. Not awfully tall, so there wasn't a lot of leg to circle round, but that's what you used to do. You do it all the way down to the foot, and then you do the other side. To which he says, have you found what you're looking for? And I said, well, I wasn't looking for anything in particular, but he said, well, just bear in mind I'm wearing tracksuit bottoms. And I had taken that into consideration. The last thing, I wanted to do was to jangle the jewellery as he's standing there. But anyway, that was all done. So yeah, you used to meet those sort of people, and he was quite an entertaining character. Only for a few moments, though. It's only a brief moment. Somebody that I found particularly interesting, who I never thought I would meet, but met at a recording session, in point of fact, many years ago when I was doing music, was Herbie Flowers. If you are familiar with Herbie Flowers, a terrific musician, particularly bass would be, and tuba, played a lot of tuba. So yeah, Herbie Flowers. He had stories that you wouldn't believe. If you've never heard of Herbie Flowers, Google him, and then find out how many number one hits he's on as a session player, and they number in the hundreds. I mean, he really is. He's Walk on the Wild Side by Lou Reed. He plays the bass on that. That's the big hook of the whole thing, and he plays that. And he was in the band Sky many years later, when I probably first recognised him. But yeah, got an opportunity to sit down with him with a bunch of others, and we just shot the breeze about stuff. He turned up to the recording session in a battered old Ford. No, it was a Volkswagen Polo, the old shape, and it also looked as though it had had a bit of a beating as well. And somebody had said to him, "Herbie, for Christ's sake," he said, "you've been on hundreds of number one singles, and you're driving this crummy car." And he said, well, you used to just get fixed fee, which is exactly what you used to get. He used to get a flat fee, which was the session fee. You didn't get an additional payment unless you got an arranger's fee, and that was something completely different. But a fascinating individual, and I would have loved to have spent a good fortnight sat down with him, regaling in some of these remarkable stories that he had about the music business and about certain individuals, none of which, of course, I will divulge here. But he should have compiled a book. There was talk about it, if it hasn't already happened. But if there is a book out there, you should definitely go and grab yourself a copy of Herbie Flowers' book and research him, check him out. He's an extraordinary individual. So thank you very much indeed for that, Vinny. I'm very grateful to you. Jazz Chowdhury 18 has sent a message that says, "Hey, couple of questions. What is your favourite vehicular stunt, and what stunt sequence is your favourite? All the best," he says. Oh dear. Vehicular stunt, well, that's relatively simple. And it's always purely on spectacle. I mean, obviously, you're looking at it from a viewer's point of view. If you look at it from a stunt man's point of view, it's a slightly different thing, but it's equally as magnificent, and I'll come to that in a second. But the gag I'm referring to, it is the car turnover in the movie No Man's Land, which is about, 86, 85, 86 probably. Russell Solberg is driving a Pontiac, and it is involved in a pipe roll. There's a Pepsi wagon which is coming down the road. The Pepsi driver hits the anchors, and the semi unit starts to jackknife down the street, comes towards him. There are a delivery of pipes on the side, and this is the beauty of the whole thing. The pipe ramp has been hidden in the pipes, and you can't see it, not the speed they're doing. And I would imagine that when Russell hit the pipe, he's probably doing the best part of 60 plus miles an hour, really giving it the beans, and it goes up in the air and it crashes through the semi-trailer and spins, and then when it hits the ground, it's practically on all fours, and it lands bang flat. It's just breathtaking, absolutely breathtaking. I believe that Corey Eubanks was involved in that. Could have been the stunt coordinator, in point of fact. And Russell is driving, and it's just remarkable. And I watch it over and over from time to time. I go back if I wanted to have a moment of going, I just need to see that again. And it's just spectacular. So that is definitely the one that I would go to. Now, the other part of that, of course, which is much more complicated, is, and what stunt sequence is your favourite? And again, there are many. There really are many. But off the top of my head, I may have to say, and again, I've said this before, but it's Bond related. But the Paris sequence in A View to a Kill is as good as anything you'd ever see, I think. If it wasn't for that, you wouldn't then later on have had the type of chases that we had in Bond, and then the type of chases that we had in Bourne, in the Jason Bourne pictures. But I think Remy Julien absolutely on the top of his game. And again, it's A View to a Kill, or... See, this is the whole thing. It's A View to a Kill or For Your Eyes Only. The 2CV chase in For Your Eyes Only. And the taxi and chasing the parachute in A View to a Kill is pretty close to being as perfect. And again, favourite vehicular gag. You know, if that's a turnover there in No Man's Land, the touch and go in A View to a Kill is breathtaking. The timing, the absolute perfection of the entire thing. Up the ramp, top of the bus, off the other side. It's just beautiful. It really is beautiful. So I would say that pick the bones out of that lot. That's probably the best way to go at it, I think. Is probably the best bit. What have we got here? We've got There Will Be Bond. Oh, that's Pete Brooker. I recognise that. That's There Will Be Bond. Now, he says, hey, John, do you think they'd get away with doing the live and let die crocodile jump nowadays for real? Well, no, is the obvious answer, because it's animals. And even though those crocodiles were probably, 700 years old or however, crocodiles live forever, don't they? But regardless of the age of the fact, it is a live animal, and therefore you wouldn't be able to do what Ross Kananga did back then, which of course was tying them down to a particular point to keep them pointing in the right direction and enabling him to go from croc to croc and across to the other side, which of course, as we all know, didn't go quite according to plan. And crocodiles are clever. They go, oh, you're doing that again, are you? Oh, you're going to do it again? Oh, well, I'm ready this time. And so consequently, he goes, and the next one has his head up and is ready for him and got him in the heel. It's too complicated. It's too difficult. There shouldn't be, not nowadays anyway, not with the world of CGI as we know them. We've seen the way in which motion capture is a whole class of its own now. I mean, it really is spectacular. And the idea of using real crocs or using real animals for anything of that nature. Riding horses is a different kettle of fish. That's still done. Falling horses, well, they're still falling horses. They're still trained for that. But there are situations now where a great deal of that is being CG'd as well. But this particular gag, no, you'll never see it again. He may do a jump from point A to point B via that one, and that one. But, Skyfall, there's a good example. Let's take that. He jumps up on top of a Komodo dragon and jumps up to the walkway across the top. Not a real Komodo, put in afterwards. So it's doable, and that's likely to be what's happening today. Health and safety also would simply just not sign off on it. I don't care if there's a crocodile. The crocodile wrangler, which is what Ross was. He was a crocodile wrangler. And only for the fact that this gag had evidently been drawn up, and they're going, I wonder where we could find somebody to do, hang on, and then went to him, and Ross went, you're going to have to open your wallet a bit. And they paid him very handsomely, and rightly so, because you wouldn't get if that was offered, all the stunt boys on that picture, if you offered that to any of the stunt guys, said, right lads, who's going to go across the crocodiles? Well, people are taking steps backwards and walking away. Regardless of the paycheck, there are things that you just don't do. There are those individuals who do not say no to a job. And that's fair enough. But once you say yes to a job, you have to go through with this, you know. You've made a commitment to the production, and you've made a commitment to everybody else. And if it's outside of your comfort zone, outside of your ballpark, well, you don't touch it with a barge pole, and that's obviously the thing to do. And clearly, Ross was the only person who was not only happy to work with the crocodiles, but to do it himself. So he doubled Roger jumping across. And, well, it's magnificent, but no, it will never, ever be done again. I think that is quite simple. So that is There Will Be Bond. Pete Brooker, thank you for that. And I think we will end here with, what have we got here? This is Mystical Luna. Oh, Mystical Luna. Mystical Luna 007. And it says, in the end of Hitchcock's Rear Window, when Jeffries, Jimmy Stewart, is pushed out of his wheelchair, who is the stuntman, if there was one, and how was it made? Now, an interesting thing here, because it's not a stunt as such. It is clever photography and not so much rear projection, but it's Jimmy Stewart is his image. He is standing and is moving to one side, and that movement is then put into the film. It's overlaid across that balcony scene. So as he drops, and then he drops, and then he drops, and every drop, his movement is slightly different. He goes to the right, and he goes further to the right, and he goes further to the right. And by the time he then hits the floor, it is a separate cut. And my understanding was that it was Eddie Parker who did that last little drop onto the ground for Stewart, and the little bit upstairs hanging from the balcony. But the fall itself is very clearly done. It's Jimmy Stewart's face, but he is not dropping away from the balcony. He is making the movements as if he is falling away, but it is put in afterwards, so the shot itself is that's why it looks like an overlay. You know, when you look at it, it does look like an overlay, but that's how that works. So back then in the 50s, that's how they would have done that. And obviously there's him falling onto the floor. The actual landing on the floor itself is done by a stunt performer, but the remainder is captured as a cutaway shot. There you go. That is the Q&A thing done for a little while. We'll do another one of those later on in the year. Lots of other bits and pieces to catch up on, and lots of other stuff to keep me busy, and I dare say to keep you busy as well. So if there is anything that you need, do give us a shout and see if we can come up with something. And don't forget to check out the Pod Dojo Network. They are responsible for the podcast and a selection of fashionable merchandise. You know you want it. There's caps, there's t-shirts in varying shapes and sizes and styles. Good Lord, we've got it all. Have yourself a classic piece of merch for the summer. You can stroll about, people go up to you and go, good Lord, that's a particularly handsome shirt you're wearing there. So may I ask where you got it? And you can tell them. Yes, I did. I got them at the Pod Dojo shop. Visit the Pod Dojo network and look for Behind the Stunts, and you'll find it there. I reckon it's a paying it forward type thing, and I'm imagining it would be hugely beneficial because the weather's getting warmer. You want something fitting and yet lightweight. So, anyway, that's my audition for QVC done, and until next time, it's bye for now.